In 1984, a sadistic killer was roaming the streets of Tampa, picking women up off the street and leaving their naked bodies scattered around Hillsborough County.
What can you tell us about the crime scene?
Detective Gary Terry was in charge of the manhunt. But for months, all he could do was follow the gruesome trail of bodies the killer left behind. By the fall, there was a new victim every 2 weeks, and the city went into panic. It was beginning to look as if Terry would never catch the killer. From 1975, Miami experienced a wave of sex crimes. Dozens of women were raped and assaulted in their own homes by a man who became known as the classified ad rapist. Police had next to no information to narrow down their search for the rapist. Then in the early 80s, the attacks stopped, just as suddenly as they'd begun. It was hoped the attacker had been caught, maybe imprisoned for another crime, or that he'd simply stopped. But instead, he just moved north to Tampa and graduated from rape to murder. On May 7th, 1984, the attacker took a step from which there was no turning back.
Hey, you want to ride? Where you headed?
After cruising Nebraska Avenue, Tampa's red light district, he picked up a nightclub dancer, 21-year-old Lana Long, on her way home from work at one of the city's strip joints. Lieutenant Gary Terry had worked his way up through criminal investigations in robbery and narcotics. When he was appointed head of Hillsborough County's small homicide unit, he had next to no experience of a murder investigation. Terry had been in his new job for just 2 weeks when the call came that a body had been found in a remote part of the county. 2 young children had stumbled over it while playing in the undergrowth.
She's lying there, and what really strikes you is just the way the legs are spread grotesquely. Her hands are bound behind her back, and then you can see a ligature around her neck, and you can see kind of like a leash leading from that ligature. During the month of May, it's hot. She's been there for almost 3 days. The smell is overwhelming, and you stand there just looking at this body and wondering who could be responsible for something like that. And I think it's that feeling once we looked at the body, this is not good.
These tracks right here are really good. I think I can get a good impression.
Are they the freshest in the area?
The only apparent trace of the killer was a tire marking in some of the soft earth. Terry ordered plaster impressions of the marks and asked for the other forensic evidence to be sent to Washington for examination by the FBI. This was an unusual step for a single homicide, but Terry already suspected that this killer might do it again. What he didn't realize was that this would be only the first of 10 bodies they would discover before the psychopath was caught. It was several days before Lana Long was identified as the victim.
Hi, Terry. Detective
We ran a newspaper article. We told the press we have an unidentified body in southern Hillsborough County. And some of the other dancers saw that article and thought, that could be Lana. We asked them to describe Lana, and they said, she was a tease, quote, unquote. She wasn't a prostitute. She danced and she got her customers to buy her drinks, and that's what the establishment wanted. But when it came time to go home, she went home to her boyfriend.
No one had seen Lana get into a car, and she hadn't told any of her friends where she was going when she set off walking down Nebraska Avenue. Just 2 weeks later, the killer picked up another young woman from the same street and dumped her body in the north of the county.
She was discovered by a guy walking his dog. That's how he found the body. The suspect made no effort to conceal the body. He didn't think we would find her that quick, but he really didn't care if we did. There was no trash on top of her, nothing. She was just laying there. And I vividly remember driving to the scene and saying to myself, please don't let her be tied up. And the patrol officers were there, and I remember asking them, the first thing I asked, is she bound? And they said, yes, sir, she is.
Gary? Yeah, down in the valley.
The killer had a unique signature. He'd strangled his victims with a leash, then cut the young woman's throat.
I actually touched the body, and she was still warm to the touch. It really struck me that here's this woman that was hours before alive, and now here she is discarded just like a piece of rubbish. We had just recently received the alert from the FBI lab about red trilobal nylon carpet fiber found in the first scene.
Lee, look. You can even see them.
These tiny flecks of red fiber would be the key forensic link between the murders. Again, Terry asked for all the evidence to be sent to the FBI's laboratories.
It's the same thing, Mick. Impressions of every tire track in the lane. Yes, sir.
What was going through our mind was, that we may have a serial killer.
Apart from the fiber evidence, Terry's officers had also determined the kind of tires on the suspect's vehicle, including an unusual handmade Vogue tire. But Terry had found no common link between the victims, and inquiries into the possibility of a drug or prostitution connection had led nowhere.
We needed help. I mean, we were running down leads, but we weren't any closer to solving or resolving the case. And we had never experienced a series of homicides of this magnitude. And so we got with the profilers who had been involved in cases like this across the country and asked for them to profile this series of homicides.
Pops, come on in. This is the profile. Come on.
The FBI said the killer would be a white male in his late 20s or his early 30s. Bobby Joe Long was a 31-year-old X-ray technician with what psychiatrists call antisocial personality disorder. In his mind, every single woman in his life had betrayed him, from his mother to his last girlfriend, a nurse at the hospital where he worked. When he discovered she was seeing someone else, his anger spiraled out of control.
I'll take you for a ride. Screw you lousy bitch!
Bobby Joe wanted revenge, and in his mind, any woman was fair game. Only a few days after the sheriff's department had identified the second victim as Michelle Sims, a fisherman found another body in an orange grove in the south of the county. It seemed Terry's fears of a serial killer were about to be confirmed. This latest body was very decomposed, but the victim was quickly identified as Elizabeth Loudenbach. Her mother had reported the 22-year-old's disappearance 16 days earlier. This murder seemed very different to Terry. The body had been found fully clothed, with no ligatures and no sign of a sexual motive.
Upon examining the background of victim number 3, we identified the fact there were a lot of dissimilarities. She was not like the previous victim. She was a factory worker. She lived at home with her mother. We actually went to her residence and searched her residence, and we found a note in which she describes the relationship between her and her boyfriend. And if anything ever happened to it, the boyfriend would be responsible. He looked like a prime suspect. He didn't have a very good alibi. He had motive, he had opportunity, and then he fails a polygraph. This looks like he would be the person responsible for the homicide of victim number 3. So this case was separated. It was taken out of the mix and assigned to a separate detective, a separate unit, while we went on about the task of finding the killer for the first 2 victims.
The only link between Lana Long and Michelle Sims seemed to be the place from which they had been abducted, Nebraska Avenue.
It's an area noted for prostitution. And so our officers concentrated in that area. We interviewed the patrol officers from the police department, we interviewed the business owners, and actually interviewed the prostitutes that were working out in that area.
18-year-old Chanel Williams was one of Nebraska Avenue's regulars.
That's it till next time then?
There won't be a next time.
She was released from Hillsborough County Jail for prostitution charge on September 28th. At that point, the city as a whole hadn't taken that much notice of what seemed to be a couple of prostitute murders.
He's really sick, and he wouldn't let me get out of his car last week.
Anything distinguishable that we can...
But rumors of a serial killer spread fast among the women working Nebraska Avenue.
How old is he? Approximately 30, 40?
30s, 40s, I don't know.
What happened? Last week, some John picked her up, beat her up pretty good, really.
There was word of a man who had been picking up prostitutes from the Nebraska and Kennedy area and beating them up.
Description of the vehicle. It's about 40.
Terry needed as much information as he could get on the women's regular customers.
Average build, Midwestern accent.
Initially, the prostitutes were really standoffish. They were not cooperating with us because they thought we were vice officers out to arrest them for prostitution.
Girls, just a minute. Sheriff's Department. I'd like to ask you a few questions.
Once they learned we were actually homicide detectives trying to help them, trying to identify the killer of Michelle Sims, they were great sources of information.
One of the girls saw the violent guy.
They provided us names and car descriptions and tag numbers of all sorts of individuals picking up prostitutes.
Among the women who worked on Nebraska Avenue was Chanel Williams and her friend Nancy.
Hey, baby, how you doing? You want a date tonight? Come on, I got a room right in here.
Because of the rumors of a serial killer, they rented a motel room to turn tricks, taking it in turns to watch each other's back.
Don't go anywhere, okay?
But when the arrangement failed that night, one of them would pay a tragic price. Terry and his officers were gradually working out a list of potential suspects among the men who frequented Nebraska Avenue.
5-10 minutes ago, Caucasian John dropped her off. White car, 2 doors. Other than that, southbound on Nebraska.
Look like the same guy?
I think so.
Which one of you is the one? Can you identify the car? Okay, listen. McCullough, why don't you grab her and you guys go with us and she can help us get the car, okay?
Yes, sir.
According to the rumors circulating among the prostitutes, there was more than one sexual predator roaming the Nebraska Avenue area. With no idea what the killer looked like, or even a description of the killer's car, Terry had to take every one of these rumors seriously. One of these men might be the killer. By 11 p.m., Chanel Williams still hadn't turned a trick. She promised to wait until Nancy had finished with her next client, but she was getting impatient.
There's the car. There it is. Right there. Right there.
Going down, Lee. Going down a little bit.
Terry, meanwhile, was following a tip-off from another prostitute.
Found him. Yep, that's him. That's him. Look at that.
Please, get your hands where I can see them right now. Get out of the car. Turn around, put your hands on the roof.
We got him, Lieutenant.
Bob, get him down to the operations center. Let's get some down here to impound this thing.
What Terry couldn't have known is that the killer was cruising only a few blocks away.
What's up? You looking for somebody to party with?
Hey, you wanna come for a ride? Are you looking for somebody?
Nah, it's just my friend. Come on, let's go.
Bobby Joe picked up Chanel from outside the Swan Motel in the early hours of September 29th.
Hey, you mind if I smoke?
Although it was now 3 months since the police had discovered Elizabeth Loudenbach's body, Bobby Joe Long had not stopped killing.
Just make a right up here on Mayfield.
He'd murdered a young waitress, Vicki Elliott, on September 6th, although her remains wouldn't be discovered until late November.
What are you doing? That was it. Oh, you got another place in mind?
Yeah, just a couple blocks.
Look, man, pull over on this block right here. This date is off.
You do exactly what I tell you, okay?
The police investigation seemed to be at a standstill. By now, Terry had asked the FBI to examine Elizabeth Loudenbach's clothing. Once again, the agency had found the telltale red fibers.
He's either a damn good actor or he's not your man.
So the case was now officially linked to the 2 other murders.
We've checked all the carpet in his house and his car. No red carpet. Okay, thanks, Ken.
The red fibers were Terry's only real lead, and they seemed to be taking the police nowhere.
You just can't put a face to the shadow. We've got a great case built, but we just don't have any body, any person, or name to attach with all this physical evidence.
That night, Bobby Joe Long tied up Chanel and raped her in his car. He'd then driven out of Tampa along the Morris Bridge Road to a remote part of the county. Chanel Williams' body would not be found for a whole week. By then, Bobby Joe Long would already have picked up his next victim.
Profilers, they tell me, you're either going to catch him, or you're going to run him away, or he's going to continue to do what he's doing. He's going to continue to kill.
By the time Chanel's body was discovered on October 7th, Gary Terry was beginning to think that the killer had left the area. And when he was called out to Morris Bridge Road on that Sunday evening, the initial reports suggested that this latest homicide was not the work of the same man.
Well, there was a construction guy who was walking around the town.
This is a black female. All of our other victims have been white. Generally, serial killers stay within their racial boundaries. White on white, black on black. And that was one of the thought processes initially, that this case would probably not be linked to the series because we have a different race of this particular victim.
As Terry approached the scene, he made a mental note that the killer had to be familiar with the neighborhood to even know the place existed.
Enjoy. There's no way to describe the horrific smell of a decaying body. When you're looking at another human being, looking at the body decaying in front of you, and you see the insects, and then you smell, I can guarantee I can close my eyes right now, I can smell that body. The unique things with the body was the fact that she had been killed by a small caliber gunshot wound to the back of the neck. The weapon of choice among serial killers is normally your hands. They want to be up close and personal. This immediately caused a discussion among the homicide investigators. Is it the same killer, or is it now, do we have a different killer? Chanel Williams, we identified through fingerprints. She had just recently been released from the Hillsborough County Jail for prostitution. She was a frequent visitor and resident of the Nebraska Avenue area, and that's where our detectives finally identified a friend of hers that placed her in that area prior to her disappearance.
Hello? Nancy? Are you Nancy?
Yeah.
I'm Lieutenant Terry, Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office. My office called you. I was here to pick up some things.
Here, take it. All she had.
Nancy had told detectives that 18-year-old Chanel had only recently moved to Tampa to try and make some money.
These were hers too.
Listen, I'm terribly sorry about this. But would you mind if I were to come in and ask just a few questions?
She had gone into a motel room to turn a trick. And she had told Chanel, I'll be right out on the street after we're finished here. She comes out on the street and Chanel has vanished. A short time after we sent the evidence to the FBI lab on Chanel Williams' case, we received the positive results back. We had red trilobal nylon carpet fiber. But it seemed like it was just a matter of days after that until we had victim number 5.
This time, there'd be no doubt that it was the same killer. Bobby Joe Long was now claiming a new victim every 2 weeks. The 5th body was found on October 14th in the east of the county. She'd been tied up just like the first 2 victims and wrapped in a child's comforter. Police officers immediately recognized the woman as Karen Dinsfriend. The 22-year-old had been in and out of jail on drug and prostitution charges since her early teens.
The young woman was in her 20s and had long light brown hair. That's all investigators have to go on at this point. Sheriff's Lieutenant Gary Terry says the body has appeared to have been here around 24 hours. They say they're confident it's a homicide.
The discovery sent a fresh chill through Tampa. There was a serial killer in the city, and there was no sign that the police were any closer to catching him.
In short, we're asking that anyone who has any information whatsoever about Karen Dinsfriend.
By now, Terry was facing a rising chorus of criticism in the press.
On or around Nebraska Avenue on Saturday night, please call our office.
Karen Dinsfriend's murder marked a turning point in the intensity of the investigation.
So now we're pulling all the homicide detectives out just to work these homicides, and I've got other detectives working the domestic homicides in those cases like that.
All right, guys, appreciate you coming up. I want to welcome those of you who have come from robbery homicide. Does everyone know each other? Good. Lee Baker is going to hand out the latest forensic report. But before we go there, I need to ask for a commitment from you that no information about this case leaves this office. I just got out of a...
We would not even let our detectives discuss the topic of forensic evidence outside the war room, as we called it.
Facts that we do have, I do not want creeping out to the suspect. Okay?
And so we kept the fiber evidence a closely guarded secret.
Page 2, about halfway down, looking at the Karen...
By Halloween, the FBI had confirmed the presence of red carpet fibers on the latest victim's clothing.
Carpet fibers, don't know where they come from, maybe a house or a car. We did get lucky and we found the existence of a single pubic hair.
The tiny red flecks were still the only concrete evidence Terry had linking the murders. They'd been found on all 5 of the victims.
Duplicates the Chanel Williams case.
Terry's biggest fear was that there could be other bodies out there just waiting to be discovered.
As well, we're probably dealing with a brown-haired white male. Okay, if you look at the very bottom there, we have... Excuse me a second, guys. Yeah, Terry. Where? All right, guys, we got another body. Joe, you and Luke come with me.
It was October 31st, and we get a call there's been a body found in northeastern Hillsborough County.
Kimberly Hopps's body had been lying in the ditch for nearly 4 weeks.
It's totally leatherized by the elements. She's just one shriveled up body. There's no ligatures. She's completely nude. And you look at it and going, it's got to be him. But then what strikes you? You walk out from the scene, you look to the right, and there's a sign that says, "Welcome to Pasco County." And you go, why can't this son of a bitch take the body 100 yards down the road and go into Pasco County? He's deliberately put him in Hillsborough County.
All right, okay, thanks a lot.
We're getting our ass kicked. We're finding body after body. And we're running down leads, we're getting phone calls, how about this, how about that? But we said, let's do some proactive measures. We selected 2 of our female detectives, and they were told to imitate prostitutes. So we give them a body transmitter, a bug to wear. And this one girl actually had trouble hiding the bug because she was dressed so scantily.
Going back to your station, I'll call you, all right? Thank you very much.
I selected a team of 4 to 6 officers to surveil her, and we let her go up on the street and pose as a prostitute. But her instructions in the meeting, number 1, you don't get in a car. We're going to be listening. We want you to pose as a prostitute, engage them in conversation, and when you're doing that, look at the car, look at him, and as they leave, comment on the tape, you know, the color of the car, the carpet, his description, the tag number and everything else, but then make an excuse while you can't get in the car. You've got another date coming. And shoo him away and wait for the next one.
Putting female officers onto the street was a risky move, but it seemed the only way to push the case forward. Then on November 3rd, 1984, Bobby Joe Long made the mistake that would ultimately lead the police right to his door.
All right, here we go.
I was so concerned, I actually went out and sat with the surveillance team and watched this young lady. And when you think about it, it's like taking a worm on a hook and putting it out there and hoping for a bite from a killer.
Where are you going to take me?
She better not get in that car.
And I instructed the surveillance officers to stop that car at all cost, to ram it, whatever they had to do to stop the car, because that would most likely be the killer if she's forced into a car. And then I went on to explain to them, if you're not successful in stopping that car, then you might as well leave your badge and commission on the dash, because that's where mine's going to be if we lose an undercover officer out here.
Why don't you come back here in, I don't know, maybe about an hour? I'm waiting for someone.
What's she talking about?
I'll take care of you real good when you come back, though. See?
Okay. All right.
Young male, 20 years old, not the guy we're looking for.
In fact, we did such a good job one night, we had traffic back down one street, around the corner, and down another street of everybody lined up to talk to this one particular undercover female officer.
Bobby Joe Long had spent a few hours cruising the city, looking for his next victim. 17-year-old Lisa McVeigh finished her shift at the donut store on Florida Avenue at 2:25 a.m. As she began the 2-mile bike ride to a home on the other side of Tampa, she noticed the red car pass her a couple of times.
Turn around.
What time is it?
Almost 2.
Long sexually assaulted Lisa McVeigh and then cruised the streets with the young girl in the passenger seat. Instead of taking her out to the countryside and killing her, he decided to take Lisa back to his apartment.
Hey, honey, looking for some fun?
Not very, like.
Come on, Cisco, get in.
Over the next 26 hours, he repeatedly raped and sexually assaulted Lisa.
So, you hungry?
No.
What do you mean, no? You must be.
Long kept Lisa bound and blindfolded for most of that 26 hours. But between episodes of sexual assault, he seemed to be living out the fantasy that Lisa was his girlfriend.
Okay, it's time to get up.
Long had set the alarm for 2:30 a.m. It seems he thought there was less chance of anyone seeing him with Lisa in the early hours of the morning.
Oh, sorry, babe. I should have guided you in. How's that for service?
Meanwhile, Gary Terry was resorting to increasingly desperate measures to catch the killer. He was even flying helicopter sorties, looking for suspicious vehicles in rural parts of the county by both day and night.
128, this is air service. 128, this is air service.
Air service, this is 128. Go ahead.
We got a car parked there with 2 bodies inside. Just off River State Park by the north entrance.
All right, let's go.
We detected some very surprised people at 2 or 3 in the morning, you know. It's suddenly a deputy sheriff in uniform be knocking on the window, excuse me, can I see your driver's license? And scramble, get their clothes back on them. And it was a good technique. Because you get stymied in the investigation. Every lead we were coming was just hitting a brick wall. And you're getting frustrated that we can't get a break on it, so we're trying to make our own breaks.
Despite Terry's proactive steps, he was no closer to a name or even a good description of the killer or his car. And the bodies kept turning up.
She found some human remains in a field just off I-275.
Can I use your phone, please?
On November the 5th, the remains of Virginia Johnson, another prostitute, were found scattered over about an acre in neighboring Pasco
Lieutenant
County.
Gary Terry, HCSO. Who's dealing with that body you got down there? Yeah, get him on the phone now. It's urgent.
Police say he seems to be targeting prostitutes in the Tampa Bay area.
Yeah, what you got? Yeah. Okay. All right, listen, go ahead and process the body and get it over to us. Yeah, we'll ship it to the FBI. See you.
Excuse me, sir, the check?
Federal Bureau of Investigation.
Agent Mike Malone, please.
One moment, please.
Agent Malone.
Mike, Gary Terry.
Hi, Gary.
Listen, I'm sitting here with Baker and Latimer. Have you guys had a chance to process that evidence yet?
Yeah, it's good and bad news. We got a positive for the red fibers, but we found...
While the FBI had successfully linked the murders, the forensic evidence was still not bringing Terry any closer to the killer.
Mike, do you have anything else on the suspect's hair?
Nothing at all. No serology, nothing. It's all, it's all way too decomposed.
So that's it?
You got it.
All right, Mike, thanks. Listen, get back with us if you got anything, all right?
For 6 months, Gary Terry had spent almost every waking moment in the hunt for the killer.
All right, guys.
He was close to
I gotta
breaking
take a break.
point.
I'm gonna step outside for a while. Call me if you get anything.
It's unbelievable the amount of personal pressure and the pressure on your agency that you're undergoing, and the frustration, knowing that if you don't catch this guy today, he could kill again.
Gary, they found another one.
The 8th victim was found on the outskirts of Tampa, just a few yards from the city jail.
Looks like your man has got all the markings, everything.
When I first entered the crime scene, you could see the body. The victim was lying on her stomach. Her legs were spread about 5 foot apart. And just looking at the body, I knew it was the same killer. It's almost like he was leaving his signature, the way he was dumping the bodies. And there was just that fear that you experience as an investigator, that you realize if you don't catch this individual, he's going to kill someone else again. If not tonight, tomorrow, the next day.
Jerry, get the body down to the op center. Okay, I'm gonna take off.
All right, we'll take care of it. We'd been working on this case for months, and we still weren't making any progress.
6 months in, it was beginning to look as if Terry would never catch the killer.
Lieutenant Terry, what can you tell us about today's crime scene? Give no comment.
And we're thinking something to ourselves that we don't want to share publicly is, what do you do when the body count gets up to 10, 15, or 20? How many people are going to have to die before we catch this killer?
At this point in the investigation, the Sheriff's Department will not confirm if this body found today.
Another body on the outskirts. Rumors of a serial killer seem to be confirmed by this latest grim discovery. He seems to be targeting prostitutes in the Tampa Bay. Refusing to say why they have linked the murder yesterday.
It's so frustrating. You know, how long is it going to take you? Are we going to get into double figures? Again, in 1984, there were no books or manuals. How do you investigate a serial killer? My lead detective, Lee Baker, and myself actually drove to Atlanta, Georgia to meet with Robbie Hamrick at the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. And we were in the midst of this discussion. We were talking about the forensic evidence when the telephone rang in Robbie's office. And it was my office in Tampa, indicating that Mike Malone was trying to find me or locate me. So I called the FBI laboratory in Washington. Mike Malone gets on the phone, and the first thing he says, "Gary, are you sitting down?" And I'm, "What are you talking about?" He said, "We just made a match on your homicide cases with the fiber." And I'm going, "What match are you talking about?" He said, "The Lisa McVeigh case, the rape case out of the city of Tampa. That's the case that we had asked the Tampa Police Department to send the evidence to the FBI laboratory." Suddenly, Mike said, when they looked at that case, they matched fiber from the rape case to the homicide case. Then Mike followed that comment up with the fact that if you find the source of fiber in the rape case, you'll find the source of the fiber in the homicide cases. This was unbelievable.
Within the hour, Terry was on a plane back to Tampa. While he was airborne, the sheriff's office sent out orders for the formation of a huge task force. Now they had a witness, and the hunt for the killer was finally on. Terry rushed back to Tampa and prepared to mount a massive manhunt. If Lisa McVeigh could give enough information about her attacker or his car, Terry might just have a chance of catching the killer before he claimed another victim.
Where is she? She's in Latimer's office, right here.
Lisa McVeigh was kidnapped. She was taken blindfolded to an apartment location where she was raped repeatedly. This case was investigated by the Tampa Police Department. They actually arrested her stepfather because he had been abusing Lisa at home. This case didn't come to our attention because we're having other rapes around the county and stuff like that, and when the victim wasn't killed or assaulted in such a fashion that was similar to homicides, then all those cases didn't always come to our attention.
It was a bank.
Lisa described how Long had bundled her into his car and driven across Tampa with her blindfolded in the passenger seat.
He actually had to stop, and he has to use a money teller card to get gas money, and then goes to a gas station.
He got out.
She peeks out of the blindfold. She can remember the word Magnum on the dash. In 1984, that was a Dodge Magnum. And she sees the Interstate 75 sign. And then she also sees a Howard Johnson's. That put one part of Hillsborough County. That was the only place where there was Interstate 75 and Howard Johnson's.
We drove to an apartment building.
I really don't want to let you go, babe.
Long finally let Lisa go, just a couple of blocks from where he'd grabbed the 17-year-old off her bike. Her ordeal had lasted 26 hours.
I just stood there. And every car that I heard, I thought it was going to be him coming back for me.
Among the things Lisa had noticed, the most significant was the word Magnum on the car dash. Only 78 and 79 model Dodge Magnums carried that marking. And so Terry flew an officer to the state capitol in Tallahassee to get the details of every Magnum in the county.
At the same time, I want the money teller machines, their transactions between 10 o'clock at night and 3 o'clock in the morning. And the bank tells us, well, we've got the records, but they're not here, they're in Jacksonville. So we fly another detective to Jacksonville to get that information. So they're coming back with that.
Listen, I need everyone to focus in on this right now, all right?
The printout ran to 15 pages.
All right, guys, gather around. Listen, this is a DMV list for Tallahassee.
Buried on page 14 was the name Robert Joe Long.
Take these. Then I want you to run all the names, see if they've been arrested. If you get a hit, give me a face. I need a picture as quickly as possible. 478.
All right, let's get moving.
At the same
now.
time, the task force is spread out looking for this car.
At 11:30 a.m. the next morning, 2 detectives saw a red Dodge pass them on Nebraska. This would prove an extraordinary piece of luck.
Excuse me, sir. Would you please place both of your hands on the steering wheel for me? Thank you. We're out looking for a robbery suspect driving a red Dodge Magnum. Like to see your driver's license, please.
They say, you know, we're investigating a robbery and your car matches the description.
Okay. Just to be a minute, if you keep your hands on the steering wheel for me. Thank you.
The driver's address, Fowler Avenue, was in exactly the right area, and the man seemed to fit Lisa's description perfectly. But with no positive evidence, the detectives had no choice but to let Long go.
Excuse me, sir. Would you mind stepping out of your car so we can just get a Polaroid snapshot?
But not before they persuaded Long to allow them to take a Polaroid of him.
They say, you know, Mr. Long, our house supervisors they're going to ask us if we searched your car. Can we search your car?
Supervisor, do you mind if we look inside your car?
I don't see why you should.
Well, sir, it's just a mere formality and it doesn't imply anything.
He says, no.
Wrong, that's fine. Go ahead and arrest me.
If you think I've done something wrong, arrest me. Otherwise, I'd like to go.
Okay, well, fine. Then you have a nice day, sir, and here's your
They come back with the information, and it's startling with it. His basic physical description matches what Lisa has told us. We pull his photograph, he's been arrested.
Really appreciate you coming in today. You doing okay?
Within the hour, Lisa McVeigh had been brought back to the operations center.
And I want you to look through them. And we're hoping that perhaps the person who abducted you is in here, okay?
We then constructed a photo pack, 6 photographs in an array to show your victim. We showed Lisa McVeigh those 6 photographs, and bingo, she picks out Bobby Joe Long as being her kidnapper and the person who had raped her repeatedly in that apartment.
That's him.
Are you sure?
Yes.
You're positive?
Yes.
A state attorney was quickly assigned to the case.
And the state attorney, we start explaining everything to him. This is the guy that did murder. He says, well, you don't have enough for murder.
You might have enough for
He said, you've got enough for maybe kidnapping, sex battery, but not for murder.
We have the hair fibers.
I'm thinking, I know it's him. But I said, okay, we'll take that.
While the arrest warrant was being drawn up, the other task force members were split up into 24-hour surveillance teams who would stick with Bobby Joe Long until he was arrested.
As they're watching the car, they watch him come back in the apartment, go out to the dumpster, come back into the apartment. So he's doing some unusual things. Later we find a knife, a Bowie knife, in the woods. Huge knife, 6 to 8 inch blade that was most likely used to kill Michelle Sims. I think he realized he screwed up with Lisa and that he may have a problem with, you know, sexually battering her, but not the murders. I don't think he realized we were that close, or he would have fled. We're typing up a search warrant for the car, typing up a search warrant for the house. And then we get the radio contact, he's moving, he's leaving the house. We're not ready yet to hit him and take him down.
That's a negative, you're just gonna have to tail him.
So he's followed into the Main Street Cinema, and while he's watching Missing in Action with Chuck Norris, there's a undercover detective to the left of him, to the right of him, in front of him, behind him. We heard all this radio traffic, you know, surveillance on the apartment set up, surveillance in the neighborhood set up, surveillance on the car. I said, get to the car. I don't care if you have to low crawl or what. Tell me what kind of tires are on that car.
I want you to get over there and check the tires for me.
The detective got to the car and he called back and said, listen, 2 of the tires on the car are Goodyear Viva. Then there's a 3rd tire on the car, and it's called a Vig or Vogue, something like that.
Copy.
Now there was no doubt that Terry had the right suspect. When Bobby Joe Long stepped out of the Main Street movie theater, Terry's team were waiting for him.
Police! Freeze! Freeze!
It was unbelievable seeing him for the first time. Someone you had chased for 8 months. someone who had killed 9 women. And then what jumps out at you is that he looks like everybody else. There's nothing unusual about him. Mr. Long is being interviewed, and he confesses to Lisa McVeigh. And then we began talking to him about the homicides. Initially, he denies it. And then the officers began explaining trace and forensic evidence to Mr. Long. And while that's happening, the FBI agents are here. They're examining the red trilobal nylon carpet fiber, and they call back with a positive match. Their carpet fiber came out of his vehicle. So then the officers go in there and hit Mr. Long with that, tell him about hair evidence, the fiber evidence, the blood evidence, and the tire evidence. And Mr. Long confesses to the homicides, and he begins detailing all the homicide scenes.
Ladies and gentlemen, late this evening, investigating officers have arrested and charged Robert J. Long, also known as Bobby Joe Long, with 9 counts of first-degree murder, plus other charges of sexual battery and rape.
Within the month, the body of a 10th victim, artist Ann Wick, would be found. Since his arrest in 1984, 3 separate trials have found Long guilty of murder. He was sentenced to death for the 3rd time in 1994 after an unsuccessful appeal. Each time, Lisa McVeigh had to face Long in court and go through her ordeal again.
Robert Joe Long was a very angry man. I knew that from the start when he grabbed me off my bicycle. When we were together, he was playing a role as a boyfriend and girlfriend. He did mention to me, I asked him a question of why he was doing this to me. I said, I'm a little girl. And his exact words, quoted, were, I'm doing this to women in general because they've hurt me in the past. So his anger, he was taking out on every woman that he came in contact with. Robert Joe Long was caught. I wanted to see him die. I didn't want him doing this to other women, get out of jail and end up doing it with somebody else.
I think we would have solved this case without Lisa McVeigh, but unfortunately I think several other people would have died before we were able to solve it. But she was that linchpin, that break in the case that we were prepared to recognize when it came. If Bobby Joe Long ever sees the light of day, all you'll have to do is follow the trail of bodies to where he's at. Because Bobby Joe Long enjoyed killing women. Bobby Joe Long will kill again if he ever sees the light of day, if he ever gets out of prison.
Bobby Joe Long is one of the longest-serving prisoners on Florida's death row. He will never be released.